Hello and welcome to this Eikon Data API tutorial. My name is Yves. I'm founder and managing partner of the Python Quants. Today's tutorial is about basics. We're going to cover the Python wrapper package, and in particular we're going to focus on the data retrieval capabilities there. The agenda is as follows. After a quick introduction with regard to the package itself and how to install it, we're going to cover the main functions to retrieve data. We will show a few examples how to use them. So basically, it's about Symbology, which is important to convert one Symbology type to another one. Then the general purpose get data function. Also the specialized one for time series, get time series. And we'll also cover get news headlines and get news story to retrieve headlines and full text stories respectively. Let me go to the Jupyter Notebook. And here in this Jupyter Notebook, here once again see the agenda. The installation is done via pip of the Eikon wrapper package. It's called Eikon as well, so all lowercase letters. And the installation is kind of straightforward. Just use pip install Eikon on the command line. If you have already a version installed and want to make sure that you are working with the latest, please use pip install Eikon and --upgrade. This will make sure that you are working with the latest version. In this notebook, we are, of course, using the Eikon Python wrapper package itself. Since we're going to do a few visualizations, we also import cufflinks, config parser module for our credentials, and we'll set the plotting mode for cufflinks to offline. So the versions that are used here is Python 3.6. The Eikon wrapper package here is used in version 0.1.12 and cufflinks in 0.12.1. Connecting to the Eikon Data API is kind of straightforward when we use the config file, which in my case is supposed to be in the current working directory. It's called eikon.cfg. It needs to have a certain structure, and in the background, it is assumed that the Eikon proxy or the Eikon application itself is up and running. The basic functions we're going to cover are as follows. We have the wrapper package itself, and whenever you are interested in the docstring and the help text, the documentation, you can use the help function of Python. For example, for the package itself, when you say help and ek, which is the abbreviation for the Eikon package, you get a rough overview of what to expect there. And in addition, for example, from within a Jupyter Notebook text, you can use tab completion to look up available functionality. So here in this case, I need to first uncomment this line, then put the cursor behind the dot, and when I now press the tab key, you see that I get a selection of the different functions and in general capabilities. Not all of them we're going to cover in this tutorial. The major ones with regard to data retrieval are the focus here, but feel free to explore the single options that you have there. So just in case of doubt, here is a screenshot of what to expect when you do the tab completion. The get symbology method or function here is about converting symbology types. The get data one is retrieve historical data. The get time series one is for the retrieval of historical time series data. So it's kind of a specialized data type for which there is a dedicated function available. Get news headlines retrieves news headlines and just the headlines. In order to get the full text, you need to use, in combination with the story ID, which you get from this function, you need to use get news story. Every single of these 5 basic functions is now illustrated here in this Jupyter Notebook. Let me get started with the symbology. This is important from different angles. So for example, if you see an ISIN, let's say, in newspapers or in some prospect, and you want to convert this to a RIC. This is where the Symbology function comes into place. Or if you want to convert RICs the other way around to ISINs, to stick to the example, then this helps you as well. What holds true for all such functions is that you can throughout use the help function to get a detailed description of the function itself. Also the parameters, which is really helpful because there are usually multiple parameters which require you to pass the values, the parameter values in certain formats, for example. And it's also explained what is returned, which errors or exceptions might be raised. And you usually also find towards the end here a few examples which you can directly apply. Assume for the following a small set of RICs, so for the Apple stock, for the Amazon stock, Tesla, and also the S&P 500. The conversion now looks as follows. I use the function get Symbology here, and when I now have a look at the ISINs, you see here the index, then also the three different, let's say tech stocks, although Tesla is kind of a electric car company. And you see the respective resulting ISINs. This is one use case. The other use case is that you have, for example, some ISINs and you want to work with the Thomson Reuters Eikon Data API, and you need to do the conversion the other way around. After a little bit of a conversion here with regard to the Python data structures, I have them available as a list object, and I can then pass this list object here also to the get Symbology function. So as you can see, this works also the other way around. RICs are important in many areas, in particular when you want to retrieve data via get data or get time series, for example. You generally need to pass some RICs there. And to get started here with the get data, once again, the help text that you can expect there. So instruments need to be passed. You can define fields, parameters, how they are passed, field names, raw output, and so forth. So when we have a look here at the first example, we are going to get data for IBM, Google, Microsoft in this case, and we specify 4 different fields: total return year to date, the weighted average cost of capital beta, the year high, and the year low. So it's 4 different fields, 4 data points for 3 different stocks in this case. When I have a look at the data grid, you see that indeed this is a grid in the sense of that I get returned a table. And of course I can work now with the table. For example, I can visualize and compare the year-to-date total return and the beta, for example, as bar charts here. See the IBM year-to-date return, Microsoft, and kind of nicely we see that the higher the beta, we also have a higher average over here total return year-to-date 2018. Similarly, we can compare year highs and year lows, also here based on a plot, so that we see kind of the trading range so far in 2018. Get time series allows the retrieval of time series data. Again, the help text, and you might notice already after the third such help text that there's kind of detailed information usually available. So we can only recommend that you have a close look and play around with the different options that you have there. So when we work with our RICs, with the list of RICs here stored in a Python list object, we can use this list object and pass it to the getTime series function, defining a start date and end date, and here just requesting the close values, and the time interval is set here to daily. Once we have retrieved the data, you see throughout we get a data frame, pandas data frame returned. You have here in the columns the data for the single RICs respectively, and the index is now a datetime index. We have a look, we see 288 data rows for the 4 different RICs. Visualization, again, is simple. Here we plot normalized data and can compare the performance of the three stocks to the S&P 500, and we see that all the three stocks over the specified time period have outperformed the broader market index S&P 500. Then we have the get news headlines function, which allows us now to retrieve text data, news data, as compared to just the financial data. The help text again specifies the parameters that are expected. Not every parameter there is kind of required. It is many of them are optional. So in that sense, when we now formulate a query, and I will base the query on the Tesla rig here, I specify the query string, replacing here in the first place the rig for Tesla, and then I'm looking for production, and the text shall be in English, starting at the beginning of February 2018, going to mid-Feb 2018, and a maximum of 10 news headlines shall be retrieved. Having a look here at the data that we retrieve, again returned as a pandas data frame object, we see already kind of the news headlines, and what is also important are not only the news headlines, in order to get access to the full text, we need the story ID, which is stored in the respective column called story ID. Going one step further now, we can make use of such a story ID to get access to the full text, and this is done via the get news story function. Here in this case, once again, the help text. This is not too long, but it shows once again how easy and straightforward it is to retrieve data. For example, here in this case, you see headlines for IBM. Shows that just the rig, so to say, is required. All the others are optional. And by default, we get just a fixed number of headlines returned. But here in our case, we have already done the search, so to say, for Tesla. And now when I want to have a look at the first story in my data frame, which is the most recent one, you see that in the column story ID, I get access to the respective story ID, which is kind of a composition of certain elements. And I can here, as you see, pick out, for example, the first, which is the most recent one from the 8th of February. And using the story ID in combination with the get news story function, we get returned a HTML text. And in order to get this displayed correctly, I use the HTML display functionality, which I have imported just before. And here we can read, for example, that the article is about Tesla and the production targets for Model 3 and about the financing plans of the company. We also see here quite a bunch of ratings and from different investment banks and financial institutions. This can, of course, then be parsed by natural language processing packages, of which there are a few available in the Python ecosystem. And of course, you can combine many such stories to a set of texts, which then can be parsed and from which you can read out information automatically, or at least semi-automatically, by the use of such NLP packages. This brings me already to the end. In this tutorial, we've covered the basic functions of Eikon wrapper package for data retrieval. You see that we've covered the package itself, installation, get symbology to convert symbology types, get data to retrieve historical data, the get time series function to retrieve historical time series data, get news headlines, as well as get news story, the news story, which we have covered in the previous and last section. As usual, you'll find the Eikon Data API developer resources down here. Also, once again, here the hint towards an article on chains, which you can use to retrieve, for example, historical time series data for whole chains of rigs. This simplifies many queries considerably. we can just recommend that you review these resources carefully. Bringing me to the end of this tutorial, which we have covered the basic data retrieval functions of the Python wrapper package for the Eikon Data API. And having said this, remains for me to wish happy Python coding and see you in the next tutorial about the Eikon Data API. Bye-bye.